The ayes are 64, the noes are 56. Schedule 2 will stand part. Members, we now move to the clauses, so 1 to 3. The question is that clauses 1 to 3 stand part. Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I want to talk about both clauses 1 and 3 in this particular set of calls that I want to make here. And the first is that we focused on this side a lot, as is our job, on the bits of this bill that we oppose and therefore the reason why we oppose the bill as a whole. But I do want to talk about something where the government has made some changes which impact on the title of this bill and also on Clause 3, the Principal Act. And that is the fact that actually this bill repeals the Modern Apprenticeship Act. And the Labor Party is actually very proud of the introduction of modern apprenticeships when we came into government at the end of 1999. The reason that we're proud of that, and why I think we should note it today as this bill repeals that act, is because in the 1990s, the system of apprenticeships that New Zealanders had come to know over many decades was dismantled by the then national government. They took away the idea that many New Zealanders had experienced, that you would come up through an industry. It was often in those days a government-run one like the railway workshops or somewhere like that, and you would learn your trade. You would become an apprentice and you would get the skills that you would then take into your later life, that you would add a lot of value to your community, and you had a career. And we were proud of the fact that Labor, when we came in 2000 and had seen the destruction of that apprenticeship system through the 1990s, we said enough's enough. And we brought in the modern apprenticeship scheme. We tried to put it in a context, that old value of learning a trade, getting an apprenticeship, doing the hard yards, and then going off and working perhaps for yourself or for another business. We took that into a modern era, and we said there will need to be a range of different apprenticeship options for young New Zealanders, and thereby we created the modern apprenticeship system. Over 15,000 people went through that modern apprenticeship system in the first 8 years of this decade. And the Labor Party knows that those 15,000 New Zealanders received a high quality training within the New Zealand qualifications framework and got their start in their chosen career. But we also acknowledge, Mr Chair, that having done that, there was time for a review of that system. The incoming national government mucked around for a couple of years, didn't do much at all. It was a critical period to be mucking around in, because it was the period in which we had to deal with the Christchurch earthquakes. But then after that, the government finally got their act together and brought in the New Zealand Apprenticeship Scheme, which brings together all of the different types of apprenticeships there are. And that's what this bill establishes, Mr Chair. And I think it's important to note that the Labor Party does support the idea of New Zealand apprenticeships. We like the idea of a more coordinated process. We like the idea that the pastoral care aspects that were so critical to modern apprenticeships are now seen right across the board in the tertiary funding that the current government's put in place. So the Youth Guarantee Scheme is an example now, where the idea that you can't just set someone off on an apprenticeship and hope for the best is now understood. That's what lay behind modern apprenticeships. The idea that you would have a coordinator, someone who is responsible for making sure that the training actually took place and the young people involved appreciated that. That's now understood and shared across the board. But we also accept, in the changing employment market that we now have, that apprenticeships are not just about those aged under 24. And that's what modern apprenticeships were targeted at. So we actually agree with the idea of broadening that out. And my colleague Carol Beaumont has already mentioned the lack of women in industry training and apprenticeships. One of the ways of breaking through that is to lift that age barrier, get rid of the age barrier, and say a woman who may need to retrain and go into a new area could do that through an apprenticeship-based system. That wasn't possible under modern apprenticeships. It is now possible under this new Act. And I think it's important, Mr Chair, to put that on the table. It's inherent in the title of the bill, the Industry Training and Apprenticeships Act, because what it does is that it repeals the Modern Apprenticeship Act and changes what was called the Industry Training Act in 1992. And I want to put on the table, Mr Chair, that there are aspects of this bill that we do actually support. And it would have been nice, Mr Chair, to have been able to say we support this whole bill, because there are those aspects that we thought were good. But we could not do that, Mr Chair, because this bill fundamentally undermines the bill that it claims to amend in Clause 3, the Industry Training Act. Because the essence of the Industry Training Act, the principal act under Clause 3, is that that act is about organising industry training across an industry. Not providing funding, Mr Chair,
Grant Robertson.
Not providing funding for individual businesses to do business-specific training. Why should the government fund that? We haven't had a single government member stand up in this House today and say why they are fundamentally changing the nature of industry training with this Act. Why would a government that supposedly is all about fiscal discipline and looking after the taxpayer decide that it's a good idea to provide funding for industry training to people who aren't industry training organisations, to businesses who may well simply train for their own skills? And even Business New Zealand, the greatest ally of this government, came to the Select Committee and said, we're not sure about this, we're cautiously supportive, but there needs to be a review really quickly to make sure that industry training money isn't going into activities that businesses should be doing themselves. And then again, Mr Chair, we wondered why the government would fundamentally undermine the Industry Training Act in Clause 3 by taking away one of the three core responsibilities of industry training organisations: skills leadership. Skills leadership is vitally important in the role of industry training because it's business identifying the skill needs that are out there. It's one of the main reasons we decide to fund industry training, is to ensure that we're looking ahead. What are the skills that are needed in the future? And under this bill, Mr Chair, we have the situation where no one is responsible for skills leadership. Isn't that an amazing thing? The government's brought a bill to the House to make nobody responsible for looking ahead to what skills New Zealand needs. How absolutely ridiculous, short-sighted, without any strategic plan, and as Tracy Martin says, typical. Typical of a government that cannot see past today. What we need is industry training organisations doing more work in terms of skills leadership. We heard from Career Force, a very high-functioning industry training organisation, about the fact that they had sat down with Health Workforce New Zealand, the government's body for finding a strategic way forward for the health workforce, to identify the needs of those healthcare workers who are often forgotten. The people in rest homes, the people who are providing in-home care. They need training. They're looking after our grandparents and our parents. They've been left out too often when industry skill plans are developed. So Career Force has been right in there with Health Workforce New Zealand, providing that skills leadership. That's gone under this bill. It's gone. It's now no one's responsibility, but the officials came and said, well, MB's going to be doing a lot of work and they're going to be talking to industry. This should be industry-led. Why is the government saying we want no one to be responsible and MB will have a little bit more of an oversight? Not good enough, Mr Chair, and undermining the very purpose of industry training. So in two hits, Mr Chair, the opening up of funding for industry training to non-ITOs, to specific businesses, and in taking away the skills leadership function, very sadly, this bill is wrongly titled. It's not the Industry Training and Apprenticeships Act, it's the Privatisation Agenda Bill. It's furthering the privatisation of education, this time in the industry training sector. Stephen Joyce, the minister responsible for this bill, has an ideological commitment to privatisation. He doesn't know why it's a good idea in this instance, he's just doing it, just as being done right across the education sector. It's wrong, Mr Chair. Education is primarily a public good. We all benefit from it. We should all have a role in making sure it's a quality system. We should all have a role in making sure that the taxpayer funding has been well spent. This bill goes in the wrong direction. It undermines industry training and it's fundamentally flawed. I wish wish we were voting for it, because I believe that apprenticeships and industry training represent a key part of our future productivity and wealth as a nation. But we cannot vote for a bill that is driven by such narrow-minded ideology and that takes away one of the core parts of industry training and skills leadership. The Labour Party will be opposing this legislation.
Dr. Megan Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to, in this